The judgment of exile, the great chamber of the Galactic Council, stretched like a cathedral of judgment, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of a dying dream. Commander Sarah Kane stood in the center of the circular arena, her hands bound behind her back with energy restraints that hummed with alien technology. Around her, tier upon tier of seats rose into shadows, filled with beings from 1,000 worlds, all united in their decision to cast humanity into the darkness. The Zephyrian High Arbiter, a towering figure with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that burned like twin stars, raised one of his 4 arms. The chamber fell silent, except for the whisper of recycled air and the distant hum of the station's fusion core. Sarah kept her chin raised, her steel-gray eyes defiant even as sweat beaded on her forehead under the weight of their collective stare. Human designation, Sarah Kane. The Arbiter's voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder, each word carefully pronounced in the universal tongue. You stand before this council as representative of your species, charged with the crime of genetic instability and violation of the Harmony Protocols. The evidence of your kind's destructive nature is undeniable. Sarah's jaw tightened. The Aurora incident. They would never let humanity forget it, never acknowledge the truth of what really happened on that research station orbiting Kepler 442b. The official report claimed human researchers had deliberately sabotaged a joint xenobiology project, killing 17 alien scientists in a fusion reactor explosion. The truth was far different, but who would believe the word of a species already marked as dangerous? The Vorthic representative, a being that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a crystalline spider, rippled with bioluminescent patterns as it spoke. The humans display emotional volatility beyond acceptable parameters. Their fight or flight responses exceed safe levels by 300%. They are, by definition, a threat to galactic stability. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber like waves across a poisoned sea. Sarah had heard it all before during the endless months of hearings, testimonies, and deliberations. They spoke of humanity as if discussing a disease to be contained, a virus to be quarantined. None of them mentioned the human doctors who had saved thousands during the Rigel Plague, or the engineers who had prevented the collapse of the Centauri mining colonies, or the explorers who had mapped dangerous regions of space that other species feared to enter. The human capacity for violence is well documented, continued the Etherian delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering force field. Their history shows constant warfare, resource competition, and territorial aggression. They are fundamentally incompatible with peaceful coexistence. Sarah finally spoke, her voice cutting through their words like a blade through silk. You speak of our violence, but ignore our sacrifice. You catalog our wars, but forget our art. You fear our emotions, but dismiss our compassion. She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. You judge us by our worst moments while refusing to see our best. The Arbiter's eyes flared brighter. The Aurora incident demonstrates the inevitable result of human integration. 17 beings died because your species cannot control its primitive impulses. 17 beings died because the consortium was conducting illegal genetic experiments on human volunteers without their knowledge. Sarah shot back, her voice rising despite the energy restraints that tightened around her wrists in response to her emotional state. My people discovered what was happening and tried to stop it. The explosion was an accident caused by the consortium's own shoddy containment protocols. The chamber erupted in angry chittering, clicking, and harmonic vibrations as delegates expressed outrage at her accusation. The Arbiter slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Enough, he roared. The human tendency to blame others for their own failures is precisely why this decision is necessary. He gestured to the massive, holographic display that materialized above the chamber, showing star charts of known space. The Galactic Council has reached its decision. Humanity is hereby classified as a dangerous species under Article 7 of the Harmony Accords. All human colonies, outposts, and vessels are to be withdrawn from Council space within 1 standard year. Any attempt to return will be met with immediate termination. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had expected exile, but not total banishment. You're condemning billions of innocent people to isolation and potential death, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We are protecting trillions of innocent beings from a species that cannot be trusted, the Arbiter replied coldly. The decision is final. Your people have 1 year to collect their affairs and depart. After that, any human presence in Council space will be considered an act of aggression. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of her species' future pressing down on her shoulders. When she opened them again, something had changed. The desperation was gone, replaced by something harder, more focused. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. Humanity has always been at its best when our backs are against the wall. You think you're protecting the galaxy from us, but you're actually freeing us from the need to play by your rules. The Arbiter's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his burning eyes. Is that a threat, human? Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and it was not a pleasant expression. No, Your Honor. It's a promise. You want us gone? Fine, but don't expect us to go quietly into the night. We'll find our own way among the stars, and when we do, the galaxy will know that humanity doesn't need your counsel to thrive. The transport ship carrying Sarah back to Earth was cramped, dirty, and filled with the stench of recycled air and desperation. She sat in a corner of the cargo hold, still wearing the formal diplomatic uniform that now felt like a costume from a play that had ended badly. Around her, other human delegates and embassy staff huddled in groups, speaking in whispers about what would happen next. Ambassador Chun, an elderly man who had spent 30 years trying to build bridges between humanity and the galaxy, sat beside her with his head in his hands. 47 colonies, he murmured. Over 200 million people scattered across 50 star systems. How do we even begin to evacuate them all? Sarah stared out the small porthole at the stars streaming past in the blue shifted glow of hyperspace. We don't evacuate, she said finally. We adapt. Chun looked up, confusion written across his weathered features. What do you mean? The council was clear. Any human presence in their space after the deadline means war. Then we make sure we're not in their space when the deadline comes, Sarah replied. We go deeper, beyond the rim, into the regions they consider too dangerous or worthless to claim. We find new worlds, new resources, new possibilities. With what ships, what supplies? Chun's voice cracked with exhaustion and despair. The Council has already frozen all our accounts, seized our trading vessels, revoked our navigation rights. We'll be lucky to salvage enough equipment to sustain a single colony, let alone hundreds. Sarah turned from the porthole, her gray eyes blazing with a fierce determination that made Chun lean back involuntarily. You're thinking like a diplomat, not a survivor. The Council expects us to beg, to plead for mercy, to try to negotiate our way back into their good graces. That's exactly what we're not going to do. She stood up, her voice carrying clearly through the cargo hold, despite being barely above normal speaking volume. Other passengers turned to listen, drawn by something in her tone that spoke of strength rather than surrender. For too long, we've tried to be what they wanted us to be, she continued. We've suppressed our nature, apologized for our instincts, and begged for acceptance from beings who see us as nothing more than dangerous animals. Well, maybe it's time we embraced what we are. Dr. Martinez, the xenobiology specialist who had been part of the Aurora Station investigation, pushed through the crowd. "What are you suggesting, Commander?" Sarah's smile was sharp as a knife's edge. "I'm suggesting we stop playing by their rules and start playing by ours. The galaxy thinks we're too violent, too unstable, too dangerous. Good. Let them think that. While they're congratulating themselves on getting rid of the scary humans, we'll be out there in the dark, building something they never expected." "Building what?" Chon asked, though something in his voice suggested he was beginning to understand. Asterisk. "An empire," Sarah said simply. "Not like theirs, built on committees and consensus and fear of change. Something new. Something uniquely human." She gestured toward the porthole and the stars beyond. "They're giving us the greatest gift they could possibly offer, and they don't even realize it. They're setting us free." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and through the porthole, the blue-white marble of Earth filled the view. It looked so peaceful from space, so innocent. None of the aliens gathered in their crystal chamber could see the cities burning below, the riots in the streets as news of the exile spread, the governments collapsing as humanity faced the reality of total isolation. But Sarah saw something else as she looked at her homeworld. She saw potential. She saw a species that had climbed out of caves to touch the stars, that had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars, that had never accepted defeat as permanent. The Galactic Council thought they were casting humanity into darkness, but they had forgotten one crucial fact about human nature. Humans had always done their best work in the dark. The shuttle that carried them down to Earth's surface landed at the ruins of what had once been Geneva Spaceport. The great terminals were dark, their alien-built hyperspace transmitters silent and cold. Human military vehicles surrounded the landing pad, their crews grim-faced and heavily armed. The breakdown of order had been swift and brutal once the news of exile spread. General Morrison, Sarah's former commanding officer, waited at the foot of the shuttle's ramp. His uniform was dirty, and his face bore the marks of sleepless nights, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Commander Kane," he said, snapping a crisp salute that she returned automatically. "I wasn't sure you'd make it back." "The Council wanted to make sure we understood the gravity of our situation," Sarah replied dryly. "How bad is it here?" Morrison's expression darkened. "Bad. 3 governments have fallen already, and the rest are barely hanging on. Food riots in most major cities, military units going rogue, alien collaborators being hunted in the streets. The evacuation of our outer colonies has turned into a nightmare, with half the transport ships being requisitioned by local authorities." They walked through the abandoned terminal, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Holographic advertisements for alien worlds still flickered weakly, promising vacations and business opportunities that would never come. Sarah felt a pang of loss for the future that had been stolen from them, and pushed the emotion aside. Grief was a luxury they couldn't afford. "What about the fleet?" she asked. "That's the one piece of good news," Morrison replied, leading her to a secured briefing room where maps and data displays covered every surface. "The aliens were so eager to get rid of us that they didn't bother to inventory our military assets properly. We've managed to hide nearly 60% of our warships in deep space caches, along with enough supplies and equipment to support a significant population." Sarah studied the displays, her tactical mind already working through possibilities. 60% of the fleet, but what about the people to crew them? And where do we go that the Council won't follow? Morrison activated a 3-dimensional star chart that filled the center of the room. The familiar territories of Council space glowed in soft blue, but beyond their borders lay vast regions of red and black, marked as unexplored or too dangerous for colonization. Dr. Patel's xenorchaeology team has been analyzing long-range sensor data from our deep space missions, he explained. They've identified at least 12 star systems beyond the Council's borders that show signs of advanced civilization. All of them are listed as hazardous or interdicted in the alien databases. But the energy signatures suggest significant infrastructure. Sarah's eyes gleamed as she studied the data. Abandoned civilizations, ghost worlds with intact technology. She looked up at Morrison. How long would it take to mount an expedition? If we're willing to risk everything on a single throw of the dice, 6 months. We load every ship we can salvage with everyone we can save, and we jump beyond the rim into unknown space. Morrison's voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the underlying uncertainty. It's the biggest gamble in human history, Sarah. If we're wrong about what's out there, we're not just risking failure, we're risking extinction. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the star chart and the dark. Regions beyond. Then she smiled, and it was the expression of someone who had just realized that losing everything meant she had nothing left to lose. General, she said, I think it's time humanity remembered what we're really good at. She reached out and touched one of the red markers on the display, a system so far from known space that it didn't even have a name, only a catalog number. We're explorers, survivors, and builders. The Council thinks they're punishing us, but they're actually giving us the chance to become something greater than we ever were, under their rules. Morrison straightened, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Sarah saw hope in his eyes. So we're really doing this? We're abandoning everything we've built here and heading into the unknown? Not abandoning, Sarah corrected. Evolving. The humans who leave Earth won't be the same species that the Council exiled. We're going to become something new, something they never anticipated. She turned to face him fully, her voice filled with quiet conviction. And when we're ready, when we've grown into what we're meant to be, we'll come back. Not as refugees begging for mercy, but as equals demanding respect. The room fell silent except for the hum of the displays and the distant sound of aircraft. Overhead, outside, humanity was dying as a member of galactic civilization. Inside this room, it was being reborn as something else entirely. Sarah looked once more at the star chart, at the unknown regions where danger and opportunity waited in equal measure. The Galactic Council had tried to write humanity's obituary, but they had forgotten one crucial thing about the species. They were so eager to banish. Humans had never met a frontier they wouldn't cross, a challenge they wouldn't face, or a darkness they wouldn't illuminate. The galaxy thought it was rid of them, but it had only succeeded in setting them free to become what they had always been destined to be, the masters of their own destiny, writing their story in fire across the stars. Asterisk Masters of the Dark 5 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and Commander Sarah Kane stood on the observation deck of the flagship Defiance, watching the construction of humanity's greatest achievement. The massive ring-shaped structure stretched across the void like a crown of lights, its crystalline segments pulsing with energy patterns that would have been impossible with conventional human technology. But nothing about humanity was conventional. Any more than the Caridian artifact, as they had come to call the ancient installation they had discovered in the system designated Hope Prime, had changed everything. What the Galactic Council had marked as a hazardous dead zone had turned out to be the greatest archaeological find in galactic history. The beings who built it had vanished eons ago, but their technology remained, waiting for minds capable of understanding and adapting it. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached from behind, her footsteps silent on the deck plating. Once Earth's leading xenoarchaeologist, she had become humanity's foremost expert on Caridian technology, her hair now streaked with premature gray from years of exposure to exotic energies. The final power coupling is online, she reported, her voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. We're ready for the first full-scale test. Sarah nodded, her reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum of the viewport. She looked older, too, the soft edges of her diplomatic past worn away by years of making life-and-death decisions for their struggling colonies. The woman who had stood before the Galactic Council in defeat had been replaced by someone harder, more focused, tempered by necessity into something that could have frightened her younger self. "How many ships do we have operational now?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. 347 combat vessels, 812 support craft, and 36 mobile colonies, Elena replied. The new construction. Yards on Caridian II just launched their first squadron of hybrid fighters. The pilots say they handle like nothing we've ever built before. Sarah smiled at that. The hybrid ships were perhaps their greatest triumph, combining human engineering principles with Caridian energy manipulation technology. They were faster than anything in the Council fleets, more maneuverable than physics should have allowed, and armed with weapons that could punch through alien shields like they were paper. More importantly, they were crewed by humans who had grown up in exile, who knew no loyalty except to their own species and no fear except failure. The comm system crackled to life, carrying the voice of Captain Torres from the Retribution. "Command, we're receiving a priority transmission from Scout Fleet 7. They've made contact with something." Sarah and Elena exchanged glances. The Scout fleets had been pushing deeper into unexplored space for 3 years now, mapping systems, searching for resources, and occasionally encountering other species that, like humanity, had been cast out by the Council's rigid hierarchy. Most of those meetings had ended in alliance or mutual assistance pacts. Some had not. "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The holographic display activated, showing the tired face of Commander Jackson, one of Sarah's most trusted scouts. His ship floated in space beside something that made both women catch their breath. It was clearly artificial, a massive structure that seemed to fold in on itself like a geometric impossibility, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "Commander King," Jackson said, his voice strained, "you need to see this. We've found something, or something found us. It's been broadcasting on all frequencies for the past 6 hours. The message is in 17 different languages, including Galactic Standard." "What's it saying?" Sarah asked, though something in Jackson's expression told her she might not like. The answer: it's a warning, or maybe an invitation. The translation algorithms are having trouble with some of the concepts, but the basic message is clear: the builders return. The cycle ends. Choose your path wisely. Elena stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "Commander Jackson, are you detecting any energy signatures similar to the Caridian installations?" "Negative, Dr. Vasquez. This is something else entirely. The power readings are off the charts, but the patterns are completely different. It's like comparing a candle to a nuclear reactor, if the nuclear reactor was also somehow alive." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In 5 years of exile, they had grown accustomed to being the most advanced force in their region of space, the inheritors of ancient knowledge that even the Council couldn't match. The possibility that something out there might be even more powerful was unsettling. "Fall back to a safe distance and maintain observation," she ordered. "We're sending reinforcements and a full science team." As the transmission ended, Elena turned to Sarah with an expression of mixed excitement and concern. "If there are still active civilizations out here, ones that predate the Council by millennia, then we need to be very careful about how we approach them," Sarah finished. "The last thing we need is to make the same mistakes the Council made with us." 3 days later, Sarah stood in the briefing room of the Defiance, surrounded by her senior staff and the holographic images of colony commanders from across their growing territory. The diversity of the group would have been impossible during humanity's time in Council space, where diplomatic protocol and political correctness had stifled innovation. Here, in the dark between the stars? Merit and results were the only qualifications that mattered. General Morrison, now graying but still sharp as a blade, activated the tactical display. "The situation has developed rapidly," he began. "Scout, Fleet 7's contact with the artifact triggered a cascade response across multiple systems. We now have confirmed sightings of similar structures in 14 locations, all of them previously thought to be empty space." Dr. Chun, the former ambassador who had found new purpose as their chief diplomatic strategist, leaned forward. "More concerning is the intelligence we've received from our contacts in the outer territories. 3 different species have reported that Council fleets are mobilizing on an unprecedented scale. Something has them very frightened." Sarah studied the data streams flowing across the display. In 5 years, they had built a network of alliances with dozens of outcast species, creating an information web that stretched across the galaxy's edge. The picture it painted was troubling. The Council, which had spent decades in comfortable stagnation, was suddenly moving with purpose and urgency. "Commander Torres," she said, addressing the captain who had become their most effective military. "Leader, what's the status of our defensive preparations?" Torres, a woman whose family had died in the evacuation riots on Earth, spoke with quiet intensity. "The ring fortress around Hope Prime is operational at 60% capacity. We have patrol squadrons deployed to all critical systems, and the new weapons platforms are online. If the Council comes for us, we can make them pay dearly for it. But we can't win a straight fight," Morrison added bluntly. "Not yet. They still have us outnumbered 50 to 1 in ships, and while our technology is superior, numbers matter in space combat." Sarah nodded. She had known this day would come eventually. The Council could not allow humanity's growing power to go unchallenged forever, especially if their new discoveries were causing ripples throughout known space. The question was whether they were ready for what came next. "Dr. Vasquez," she said, turning to the xenarchaeologist, "how close are we to fully understanding the Caridian systems?" Elena's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of a researcher on the verge of a breakthrough. "Closer than we've ever been. The artifacts that Scout Fleet 7 discovered aren't just ancient technology, they are keys. Each one unlocks new functions in the Caridian installations. If my calculations are correct, we're looking at a network that spans the entire galaxy, hidden in subspace and dormant for millions of years. A network that's waking up," Dr. Chon observed. "The question is why now?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The holographic display shifted to show sensor readings from the outer perimeter, where something impossible was happening. Space itself seemed to be tearing open, revealing glimpses of swirling energy and geometric patterns that defied understanding. Captain Torres was the first to find her voice. "What in the hell is that?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The artifact that Scout Fleet 7 had discovered was transmitting again, but this time the message was clear and direct, broadcast simultaneously in every human colony across their territory. "Children of Earth," the voice said, speaking in perfect English with an accent that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We have watched your journey from exile to awakening. You have proven worthy of the inheritance that was prepared for you. The time of preparation is ending. The time of choosing has begun." The tiers in space stabilized, revealing gateways that led to other systems, other regions of the galaxy that humanity had never seen. Through each portal, vast fleets of ships became visible, vessels that combined human design principles with technology beyond anything they had imagined. "You stand at the threshold of greatness," the voice continued. "Your enemies gather in fear, knowing that the old order is ending. They seek to destroy you before you can claim your destiny. But you are no longer the species they cast into darkness. You have become something new, something that they cannot understand or control." Sarah felt her heart pounding as she realized what she was seeing. These weren't just ships. They were the scattered fleets of human colonies that had been lost during the Exodus, presumed destroyed or captured. But they had survived, grown, evolved in isolation until they had become something magnificent and terrible. "Commander Kane," the voice said, and Sarah felt a shock of recognition. It was her own voice, older and changed by years of experience. She had not yet lived. "The choice is yours. Remain hidden in the darkness, or step forward to claim humanity's place as the guardians of galactic freedom. But know that once this path is chosen, there can be no turning back." The portals began to pulse with increasing intensity, and through them came ships. Hundreds of them, then thousands, each one bearing the mark of humanity, but transformed by contact with technologies that made even the Council's best efforts look primitive. Sarah watched in amazement as her own species returned to her, no longer the refugees who had fled into exile, but something greater, more unified, more powerful, than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Asterisk.